Thanks for joining me on this episode of Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. On today's episode, I want to talk about another one of these classic short hunts. And this is another one from 2008. So I brought you 4 so far. The first 2 were bucks that I killed, and the last 2, 3 and 4, were bucks that my friend Mike Sawyer shot. I had forgotten how good that farm really was back then. I mean, those were 4 really good, solid, mature bucks. Now the 5th one is this deer over my right shoulder. And this was a buck that I shot in 2008 that got away. And it was the most unbelievable fluke that I've ever experienced in a tree stand. Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails is brought to you by Redneck Blinds, Code of Silence Apparel, Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail App, Whitetail Institute, Research Equals Results, B3 Releases, XO Broadheads, Exact Sights, Muddy Outdoors Tree Stands, Stealth Cam Trail Cameras, and Hoyt.
You knocked my legs out. Stay on him. You knocked my legs out right when I shot. No, seriously. I shot about 6 inches low.
See him?
Yeah. I'm just gonna watch him.
Okay. I'm rolling on you, so whenever you want done, you hear me. I'm not real worried about it.
I just really don't know if we're gonna get him. And I just saw him. I mean, he was only 30 yards away when I saw him coming along the edge of that standing corn. I said, Drew, big buck, big buck, big buck. So Drew gets the camera over on him, and he's coming across. And just as I get ready to shoot, the buck steps behind some leaves so the camera can't get him. And Drew's trying to get me to stop. And I didn't realize he was trying to get me to stop. Well, at the exact moment that I went to pull the trigger, he pushed off on my tree stand. I've got kind of a funky tree stand that sort of pivots. And when he pushed off on it to change positions to take the camera around me, he cut the legs out from under me and I fell right when I shot. Just at the exact instant I was pulling the trigger. So I hit him low and back and gosh, I don't know. It doesn't look too good. I mean, what are the chances of that? Right at the exact instant when I was pulling the trigger, my legs get cut out from under me. Right at about 35 moves. That dog's running off. Get on him. Are you recording? He's right at 35, I'd say. Oh, he's at about 30. He's at about 20. about being in the right place on the right night. Holy smokes. That's that buck with the broken beam that I had those trail camera pictures of. I guessed him at a high 180s pushing 190. And then here, an hour and a half ago, I shot a buck back and low in the gut. There's probably high 180s pushing 190. I mean, what are the chances of that from one tree, one night? Whew, man, that's crazy. I've always said November 7th was the best day of the year, and I'm never going to change my idea about that. Man, what a crazy night. Okay, I'm back at the truck, and we took the long way around. We didn't want to go anywhere near where that buck had gone. And I've got the arrow here, and it doesn't have a real foul smell to it, but there's something on there. I mean, it's mostly, it looks like it's just fat or gristle or something. It really doesn't have a gutty smell, so that's not encouraging, but I don't know. We're going to look at the footage a little bit more and see if we can figure out more about it, but we'll be back tomorrow midday and try to find that deer. Well, it's 10:30 on the 8th of November, and I shot that buck at about a little after 2 o'clock yesterday, and I got a whole bunch of people mobilized. It's kind of a goat rodeo, actually, but well, this is what we need. We need people. So we got guys, little sentries up on lookout points, and guys making pushes, and we're going to go down this ditch and go to where I last saw blood. Mike's going to take one side of the ditch, and I'm going to take the other. We're just going to try to work our way up through there, and hopefully we can find him. So that's the plan.
Poor Drew Yarkowski. That was the first hunt that Drew had ever filmed with me. So he was an intern that year in 2008. He was actually still going to college, and he was coming down to my office a couple days a week and helping out with the production of these shows. And I mentioned it before, I mean, Drew went on to a really stellar career in the hunting industry, but he didn't start out on the best of footing. This was his first hunt in the tree with me. And you know, the odds of this happening, I was leaning against the branch, full draw, squeezing the trigger. I mean, the buck was like 10, 12 yards away. I thought, well, I'm gonna make a perfect shot. So I had the pin right buried on his vitals, and I was squeezing it. And just as the trigger broke, Drew had to push off because he was, I don't know what he was doing, but he filmed it for a certain distance, and then he couldn't go any further, and rather than calling me off the shot, he just made a quick movement and pulled around to pull around me to film on the other side. So I was between him and the deer. He was sitting on a tree branch, and he had his foot on my tree stand. And that tree stand back then, it was what they called a vantage point stand, and they don't make them anymore that I know of. But she screwed this little round circular receptacle into the tree, and then the stand just had a peg that fit down in that. And that was the only thing that held those in the tree. They were really quick to put up. I loved them for that reason. I mean, I could climb the tree, you know, screw the screw in, take the stand off, set it in the receptacle, and you know, be hunting in just a matter of minutes. But they were really unstable until you had your weight on it. Well, Drew, because he used, you know, my stand for leverage to push around to film on the other side, he kicked my stand out. And in the process of doing that, I think he was pulling. So he pulled my stand back toward him, and then I folded forward just at the very instant when the trigger was breaking. You know, had he waited, I'm saying a fraction of a second, half a second longer to make that movement, then I would have shot that buck right through the vitals. But as it was, the arrow caught him low, and he went, that deer was, I think, almost a mile away when the guys found him shed hunting that next spring. Very discouraging. One of the lowest points during my early deer hunting career. I've had a number of them over the years, but that was one of the first really big deer that had gotten away from me. It's kind of funny too that the second buck that came out there, that came within close range of that stand, was another giant. And we should talk about that deer sometime. I'll give you a really quick, like a really brief history on that buck. We called him Broken Beam. And that deer, it's so funny because almost every year, towards the end of his life, he broke off part of his beam. I don't know if he did it because of the way that he rubbed trees, or if he just had like a softer, weaker, more porous antler. I don't know. But for almost his entire life, he was about 150-inch 10-pointer, just year after year after year. Then all of a sudden, boom, as he got to the very ripe old age. I don't know how old that deer was. I mean, he could have been 7 or 8 years old, or who knows what. But then he just blew up into this 190-plus inch buck that, sticker points everywhere, lots of mass. I know it was the same deer. It took a while to figure it out, but looking at the history that I had with the deer, and then looking at this deer, is like, okay, finally I put the pieces together, and that was the same deer. And he didn't blow up until he got old. And I think sometimes when they stop breeding, as they get older, or they cut back considerably on the amount of breeding that they do, that they go into the winter in better condition, and then they grow their a better set of antlers the next year. So my guess is, and I've seen it on other bucks that have done the same thing. In fact, someday I'll do an episode on that and just show you some of these deer over the years that I've seen that have really blown up once they hit the past almost normal life cycle of a buck. But it's just kind of interesting that on this hunt, when one of the best deer that I've ever seen gave me the slip, we also saw this other giant. And again, that was 2008. I wonder how many other big deer were on the farm back then. I didn't have a lot of trail cameras out. It would have been interesting, knowing what I know now, to be able to go back and just see what else was around that place. I don't have a really good lesson for you on this one. I'd love to be able to say, this is what we learned and this is what we're going to do different. But this hunt was more of a novelty. It's more of like, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Sort of a episode. And there's no real takeaway because we don't use stands like that anymore. I never would have considered that, because I'd hunted out of those stands so much. It's just a fluke, and sometimes they get away. Well, that's it for 2008. 5 giant bucks that we killed, and then that really big one that had the broken beam. And by the way, that deer died that winter. We found him dead while shed hunting the following winter. So he blew up right before he died, and that was the end of it. But really cool season, unbelievable season, really. So now we're going to move on to 2009 with the next episode. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you right back here again soon for the next episode of Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. And remember to always dream big.